I hired two alien women for one night, but now they don't want me to leave. HFY Sci-Fi Story. Evan Hale arrived at the Caro's trade station with tired eyes and a heavier heart than the small travel bag slung over his shoulder. The station floated like a metal city in the dark between stars, full of noise, light, and thousands of species passing through every cycle. Evan had been traveling for almost 7 years straight. Cargo runs, repair jobs, escort duty, always moving, never staying long enough to feel like he belonged anywhere. Humans were not common this far from Earth space. When Evan walked through the main concourse, more than a few eyes followed him, some curious, some cautious, a few openly uneasy. Humans had a reputation in galactic records, strong emotions, strange social habits, dangerous persistence. Evan knew the stories. He had lived with them his whole adult life. He ignored the stares and focused on finding a place to rest. His last job had ended badly. Not violently, just empty. The crew had gone their separate ways without goodbyes. The ship was sold. The future felt unclear. That was how he found himself standing in front of a softly glowing terminal marked with symbols for companionship and cultural exchange. Evan paused. On Earth, the word companionship meant many things. Out here, it meant something different: legal, structured, safe. The service was explained clearly on the screen. Temporary company, conversation, emotional presence. No physical acts, everything monitored, everything consensual. Evan hesitated only a moment before pressing his palm to the scanner. He told himself it was just one night. A chance to not be alone in a place where loneliness felt louder than engine noise. The system processed his request and assigned him two companions instead of one. That was unusual, but Evan did not question it. He was too tired to argue. They arrived an hour later at the small private room the service had reserved. Evan stood when the door opened, out of habit more than planning. The first to enter was tall and slender, her skin a smooth shade of deep blue with faint silver patterns that shifted slowly like clouds. Her eyes were large and dark, reflecting light in strange ways. She moved quietly, every step measured and calm. Her name translated roughly to Lurie. The second was shorter, broader in build, with reddish-brown skin and sharp golden eyes. Thin ridges marked her temples, signs of a warrior lineage. She carried herself with alert confidence, as if expecting trouble even here. Her name translated as Salith. They studied Evan openly. Humans were rare enough to be interesting. Evan introduced himself simply. "I'm Evan, thanks for coming." Lurie tilted her head slightly. Salith crossed her arms. "This is your first time using the service," Lurie said, her voice smooth and careful. "Your emotional markers show high fatigue and low aggression." Evan gave a small smile. "That sounds about right." They sat together around a low table, light dimmed to a comfortable level. The station noise faded behind thick walls. The contract allowed Evan to set expectations. Many clients asked for entertainment. Some asked for validation. Some asked to be praised or feared. Evan surprised them by asking a simple question. "So, how are you both doing?" Salith blinked. Lurie's patterns shifted slightly. "That is not a standard opening," Salith said. Evan shrugged. "I'm not a standard guy, I guess." They talked about travel, about work, about the strange rules of the station. Evan listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he did not exaggerate or boast. He admitted fear when it existed. He admitted mistakes. He laughed at himself. At one point, Salith mentioned her species valued strength above all else. Evan nodded. "Strength matters," he said. "But knowing when not to use it matters too." That answer stayed with her longer than she expected. Lurie, whose species bonded through shared emotional honesty, felt something shift quietly during the conversation. Evan never tried to impress. He never tried to dominate the space. When Lurie sensed his thoughts brushing against hers by accident, she felt no hidden hunger, no intent to manipulate. Time passed faster than Evan expected. They shared food. They shared stories. Evan spoke of Earth once briefly, of rain, of quiet nights where the sky felt close. When the station lights shifted to indicate the end of the contracted period, Evan stood. "Well," he said softly, "thank you. This helped more than I thought it would." He bowed slightly, another human habit learned from many cultures, and moved toward the door. Lurie froze. Salith turned sharply. "You are leaving?" "Yeah," Evan said. "That was the deal." Lurie's voice lowered. "You completed the exchange." Evan paused. "I hope so." "If I did anything wrong—" "You did not," Salith interrupted, her tone strained. "You did something unexpected." Before Evan could ask what she meant, station security alerts flickered briefly on the wall display and vanished again. Lurie looked at Salith. Salith looked back. Something unspoken passed between them. "Evan Hale," Lurie said carefully, "there are cultural implications you were not informed about." Evan frowned. "That doesn't sound good." Salith took a slow breath. "Among our people, vulnerability offered without demand forms a binding mark." Evan stared at her. I wasn't trying to bind anything." "We know," Lurie said. "That is why it worked." Evan let out a quiet laugh, unsure if this was a joke. "Okay. So what does that mean for me?" Salith's eyes did not leave his. "It means if you leave now, questions will be asked, dangerous ones." Evan looked from one to the other. He had come here for one simple night. Instead, he felt the weight of attention pressing in from outside the room, unseen but real. He lowered his bag back to the floor. "All right," he said calmly. "Then let's talk. I don't like leaving problems behind." Outside the room, unseen by Evan, two station observers marked their screens with new symbols. "Human behavior, anomalous. Classification, reassessment required." And somewhere deep in the station's ancient legal systems, an old rule quietly woke up. Evan did not sleep that cycle. The room remained quiet, but his mind stayed active, replaying every word from the night before. He sat near the small table, hands wrapped around a warm drink he barely tasted. Across from him, Lurie sat still, eyes half closed, sensing currents Evan could not see. Salith stood near the wall, arms folded, alert as ever. "So," Evan finally said, breaking the silence, "let me make sure I understand this. I talked, I listened, I treated you like people, and now the station thinks I did something illegal." "Not illegal," Lurie replied softly. "Rare," Salith added, "and dangerous depending on who notices." Evan rubbed his face. "That's a new one." The station announcement system hummed faintly. Shift change, new traffic arriving. Life continued outside as if nothing unusual had happened. Inside the room, tension thickened. Lurie turned to Evan. "My species forms long-term social bonds through shared emotional openness. It is usually accidental only among our own kind. With others, it requires training, preparation, consent." "And humans?" Evan asked. Lurie's silver patterns dimmed slightly. "Humans were classified as incompatible." Salith made a low sound of frustration. "Galactic records say humans hide emotions behind aggression or humor. They say humans are unpredictable and emotionally shallow." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's not very nice." "You disproved it," Salith said bluntly. Evan leaned back in his chair. "I didn't mean to disprove anything, I was just being me." "That," Lurie said, "is the problem." There was a knock at the door, all three froze. Salith moved first, stepping in front of Evan without thinking. Her hand hovered near a weapon she was not allowed to carry in this sector. A calm mechanical voice came from outside. "Station liaison officer requesting a welfare confirmation." Lurie exhaled slowly. "Too soon." Evan stood. "Let me handle it." Salith turned sharply. "You should not." "It's okay," Evan said quietly. "If this is about me, then hiding won't help." He opened the door. The liaison officer was tall and insect-like, with layered eyes and polished metal bands marking official authority. Its voice remained neutral. "Human Evan Hale, your presence has triggered multiple observation flags. This is a routine inquiry." Evan nodded. "All right." The officer's gaze shifted briefly to Lurie and Salith. Your companions appear distressed. They're worried about me, Evan said. That's all. The officer paused. Unusual. Evan smiled faintly. I get that a lot. After a brief scan and several questions about his travel history, employment, and intent, the officer stepped back. You are not under arrest, it said. However, it is advised you remain on station until further review. Salith's jaw tightened. Advised. The officer's eyes flicked to her, strongly. When the door closed again, Evan let out a long breath. Well, he said, I've been stuck in worse places. That earned a short, surprised laugh from Salith before she could stop herself. Hours passed, then more. Word spread quietly. Not loudly, not openly, but enough. Curious glances followed Evan when he stepped into the public concourse with Lurie and Salith beside him. Aliens whispered. Sensors tracked. Analysts debated. Some saw a threat. Others saw opportunity. Evan noticed the attention but did not react to it. He bought food. He thanked vendors. He apologized when he bumped into someone smaller than him. Simple actions. Human habits. Each one added weight to the growing unease around him. In a high-level observation chamber, data scrolled across translucent screens. Human subject displays sustained empathy under scrutiny, one analyst noted. Possible deception, another suggested. Unlikely, a third replied. Pattern consistency too stable. Back in the station's lower levels, Evan sat with Lurie near a wide window overlooking the stars. Salith stood watch nearby. You don't seem afraid, Lurie observed. Evan thought for a moment. I am, just not in the way you expect. Explain. I'm not scared of being hurt, he said. I'm scared of hurting someone else by accident. Lurie's patterns shimmered brightly at that. Salith watched him more closely after that. The council summons arrived shortly after. It was polite, formal, impossible to refuse. The council chamber was large, circular, and cold. Representatives from multiple species floated, stood, or sat according to their biology. Evan felt very human there, very solid, very visible. Lurie and Salith were allowed to attend but not speak unless asked. Human Evan Hale, the council chair began, you have unknowingly engaged in a dual bond convergence with two protected service members. Evan raised his hand slightly. I didn't know that was possible. That is confirmed, the chair replied. Intent is not under question. Effect is, another council member leaned forward. Why did you choose to listen instead of assert control? Evan blinked. Because they're people, a murmur spread across the chamber. Why did you decline status privileges? Another asked. They didn't feel right. Why did you stay when informed of risk? Evan looked back at Lurie and Salith, then at the council. Because leaving would have made things worse for them, he said simply. Silence followed. Finally, the chair spoke again. Humans were categorized as socially volatile. You do not match the data, Evan shrugged. Maybe the data's old. The council recessed to deliberate. Outside the chamber, Salith finally spoke. You challenged them without raising your voice. Evan smiled weakly. Yelling rarely helps. Lurie studied him with something close to awe. Among my people, such restraint is taught for decades. On Earth, Evan said, we learn it the hard way. The council returned. Evan Hale, the chair announced. Until further notice, you are designated a protected cultural variable. You will remain on station under observation. Evan nodded. Understood. And, the chair added, your bonds will not be severed. Salith released a breath she had been holding. Lurie's patterns glowed warmly. As they left the chamber, Evan glanced back at the vast room. He had come to the station looking for one quiet night. Instead, he had become something else entirely. Not a threat, not a weapon. A question the galaxy was no longer sure how to answer. The days that followed were heavier than the silence before a storm. Evan moved through the station under quiet watch. Not guards, not escorts, observers. Small drones floated at a respectful distance. Sensors tracked his movements. Every conversation he had was logged. every reaction measured. Yet no one treated him like a prisoner. That made it worse. Lurie explained it one quiet cycle while they sat near a hydroponic garden built for oxygen-breathing species. "You are a variable," she said. "The Council does not yet know if you are a risk or a resource." Evan sighed. "I was hoping for guest." Solith snorted softly from where she leaned against a metal column. "The galaxy does not use that word lightly." Despite the attention, Evan stayed himself. He greeted workers by name when he learned them. He helped a maintenance crew lift a jammed panel without being asked. When a young courier dropped a crate, Evan knelt to help gather the scattered contents, ignoring the stares of those who believed humans only acted with purpose. Each small act rippled outward. Some species began to relax around him. Others grew more uneasy. Rumors formed quickly. Some said humans could create bonds without intention. Others claimed Evan was a trained manipulator. A few whispered that humans had evolved emotional weapons. None of it was true. Evan just kept doing what felt right. The pressure finally broke when a delegation from the Vierks Collective arrived. The Vierks were ancient, precise, and deeply uncomfortable with unpredictability. Their society was built on strict emotional control. Bonds were regulated. Attachment was limited. A human forming an unregistered dual bond alarmed them. They requested an emergency hearing. The council chamber filled again, tenser this time. Security fields hummed faintly. Lurie's patterns shifted uneasily. Solith stood rigid, ready to defend even though she knew she could not fight the council. Evan stood alone at the center. The Vierk speaker addressed him, its voice flat and cold. "Human Evan Hale, your presence destabilizes established cultural frameworks." Evan nodded. "I'm sorry," the Vierks paused. "Your apology is irrelevant." "Still felt right to say," Evan replied. A murmur spread through the chamber. "You have formed bonds without training or permission," the Vierks continued. "This indicates either recklessness or threat." Evan took a breath. "I didn't form anything on purpose, I just treated them with respect." "Respect is regulated," the Vierks said sharply. Solith's hands clenched. Lurie's glow dimmed. The Vierks turned to the council. "We propose containment. Removal of the human from free interaction zones." Evan felt his stomach tighten, but he did not speak. The council hesitated. Then something unexpected happened. A smaller delegate, a member of a trading species rarely involved in politics, spoke up. "This human assisted my people last cycle," the delegate said. "He noticed a contract imbalance none of us had seen. He explained it clearly, without demand." Another voice joined. Then another. A maintenance overseer, a courier union representative, a medical observer. Stories surfaced. Evan fixing problems he was not paid to fix. Evan stepping aside instead of pushing forward. Evan asking before acting. The Vierk speaker's tone sharpened. "Anecdotes do not outweigh risk." Evan finally spoke. "Then let me reduce the risk." All eyes turned to him. "How?" the council chair asked. "By agreeing to rules," Evan said. "Clear ones. If I mess up, you stop me, but don't punish others for my existence." The Vierks tilted its head. "You would submit to limitation," Evan nodded, "if it keeps people safe." Silence followed. The Vierks withdrew their proposal, not because they trusted Evan, but because the data no longer supported immediate containment. The decision angered some factions. That anger found another outlet. Later that cycle, as Evan walked with Lurie through a quieter corridor, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. A group of armed contractors blocked the path ahead, private security hired by a corporate interest that wanted Evan removed from the equation. Solith reacted instantly, stepping in front of Evan. "Stay back," she warned them. The leader sneered. "Stand aside, the human is coming with us." Evan felt fear rise, but he stayed still. "No," Evan said calmly. "I'm not." Weapons powered up. Station law forbade violence, but some groups ignored laws when profit was involved. Before anyone could fire, Evan did something none of them expected. He stepped forward past Solith and raised his hands. "If you take me," he said, "you violate station neutrality. Every faction watching will know." The leader hesitated. "And," Evan added, "you'll prove that humans are dangerous because you forced us to be." That landed harder than a threat. Station security arrived seconds later, overwhelming the contractors and detaining them without a shot fired. Afterward, Solith grabbed Evan by the shoulder. "You should not have stepped forward." Evan met her eyes. "If I hide behind you, they're right." That moment changed something for her. Not desire, not dependence, respect. The council responded swiftly. Evan was given provisional authority as a cultural liaison, limited, supervised, but real. The title meant little to Evan. The effect meant everything. Under his presence, disputes softened. Misunderstandings were explained instead of punished. Species that had never spoken directly began sharing space, not because Evan told them to, because he showed them how. Lurie observed it all with growing clarity. "Your kind does not bond by accident," she said one cycle. "You bond by choice." Evan smiled faintly. "We mess it up a lot." "But you try," Solith said, "even when it costs you." The station felt different now, still tense, still uncertain, but alive in a new way. Deep within the galactic network, reports were sent. Human empathy classified as strategic force, threat level reassessed, potential unknown. Evan watched the stars through the station glass that night, unaware of how far those words would travel. He only knew one thing. He was no longer just trying to survive the galaxy. He was changing it, simply by refusing to be anything other than human. Evan had grown used to the station's rhythms, yet he never forgot the strange weight that had arrived with him. He walked through corridors that now seemed less intimidating, though he knew eyes followed him constantly. Not in fear, curiosity. Not in hostility, attention. The station had changed around him subtly, like water shaping stones. Lurie and Solith were always near but never crowding. Their presence had become a kind of anchor. Evan realized that he no longer worried about them. He trusted them. And they trusted him. That was remarkable. Very few humans had ever earned such trust so quickly, across species whose traditions were older than Earth itself. The council had convened another hearing. This time it was not to reprimand him. It was to formally recognize his role as a cultural liaison, a title that allowed him to move freely, observe, and assist in resolving conflicts. Evan understood the honor but also the responsibility. He was human, and humans were often underestimated. Now he had a chance to turn that perception around. The hearing began with the usual formalities. The chamber hummed with tension, though not hostility. Representatives from multiple species filled every seat. Some nodded politely as Evan entered. Others studied him with a careful, almost clinical eye. The Vierks delegate from the previous hearing was present, seated stiffly, its gaze sharp and unblinking. Evan spoke first. "I'm not here to rewrite your rules," he said calmly. "I'm here to help anyone who wants help, and to make sure no one is hurt by misunderstandings. That's all." A murmur ran through the chamber. Many species had assumed that humans were unpredictable, prone to extremes. Yet here stood one human who spoke clearly, without pride or threat, yet with confidence that could not be ignored. The Vierks delegate tilted its head. "You continue to defy expectations. Humans are assumed to be volatile, unable to maintain consistency under observation." Evan nodded. "I'm aware. I've had 7 years of practice." A faint ripple of laughter moved through the assembly. Even the Vierks could not hide a subtle shift in demeanor. The council chair spoke next. "Human Evan Hale has shown restraint, judgment, and insight beyond what our records indicate is possible for his species. His actions have prevented several conflicts and clarified misunderstandings that could have escalated into serious incidents." Evan glanced at Lurie and Solith. Their expressions were unreadable, yet he felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for what humans could achieve when they acted with care and empathy. The council then opened the floor to public comments. Aliens from different sectors stepped forward. Some were station workers, some were traders, some were representatives of distant civilizations. Each spoke of a minor incident or personal story where Evan's intervention had prevented harm or misunderstanding. A young courier, barely the size of a human child, described how Evan had helped recover lost cargo without scolding or demanding payment. A vendor recounted how he had mediated a dispute over dock space between two alien merchants. Each story reinforced the same truth. Humans, when willing, could act as bridges in ways no other species could. Finally, the council chair addressed the room. Evan Hale, you have proven that humans are capable of cooperation, patience, and judgment that rivals our most seasoned diplomats. You are hereby granted full liaison privileges, allowing you to operate across species without restriction, so long as your actions continue to uphold safety and fairness. Evan inclined his head. He knew the responsibility would be heavy, but he also knew that this was not a victory for himself. It was a victory for humanity, a demonstration that humans could earn trust and respect in ways no one expected. After the hearing, Evan walked through the station with Lurie and Salith. The corridors were filled with life: traders, travelers, maintenance crews, and students from a learning hub near the docking bay. Aliens passed with nods or polite glances. Some paused briefly to watch him, intrigued by the human who had altered expectations so profoundly. Evan felt the weight of it all, but also a sense of freedom he had not known in years. Freedom not because rules were removed, but because understanding replaced fear. The station itself seemed lighter, almost breathing differently around him. Salith finally spoke. "You could leave," she said quietly. "You have permission to return to your travels. You are no longer bound by the dual bond. You are free." Evan stopped. He looked at her, then at Lurie. "I know," he said, "and I could, but why would I leave?" Salith frowned slightly. "You have obligations elsewhere. Friends, family, work. Humans travel far and wide." "I've done enough traveling to know that distance is nothing," Evan replied. "The station, this place, you too, the work I've started here, it matters more to me than moving on. I can go anywhere, but some places are worth staying for." Lurie's patterns brightened, slow and steady. "You are choosing," she said, "not out of obligation but understanding." "That is rare," Evan smiled. "I choose." From that moment, a new routine took shape. Evan began assisting with mediation between species who struggled to communicate. Disputes over docking bays, trading rights, and cultural misunderstandings became opportunities for him to apply his simple but effective human logic. At first, other species were skeptical. But soon, humans, despite being rare, earned a reputation not as dangerous or unpredictable, but as facilitators. If a human like Evan was present, conflicts rarely escalated. He acted calmly, listened, and considered the needs of all parties equally. Some station factions tried to exploit his reputation. Corporate interests requested his presence to smooth over trade negotiations. Political groups watched him closely, curious if his influence could be leveraged. Evan handled it all with the same quiet care. He never sought advantage, never tried to dominate, never demanded recognition. The aliens began to notice something subtle. Humans, they realized, did not require formal authority to command respect. Authority was granted because humans acted with fairness, courage, and empathy. That was far more powerful than any official title. Months passed. Evan became a fixture on the station. His presence was expected, his advice sought, but still he remained himself, quiet, observant, patient, and willing to act when necessary. Salith and Lurie often accompanied him, not as escorts, not as guardians, but as colleagues and friends. They discussed approaches to conflicts, shared observations, and occasionally laughed over minor mistakes. The bond formed between them was no longer contractual. It was mutual respect, trust, and camaraderie. One evening, the three of them stood on a viewing platform overlooking the glittering expanse of stars beyond the station. Light from distant planets and nebulae reflected on the transparent shielding above them, casting colored patterns across the floor. Evan felt a deep sense of peace. "You've changed this station," Solith said. "People see things differently now. Species who never spoke are trying. Conflicts are smaller. They watch you and wonder how it's possible." Evan shook his head. "I didn't do anything magical. I just treated people as people." Lurie added softly, "That is precisely what humans do differently. Others attempt to enforce behavior with law, status, or fear. You rely on understanding." Evan smiled faintly. "Understanding is free, but it's rare in this galaxy." They stood in silence, watching the stars. The station hummed around them, ships docking, engines whirring, voices blending into the background. Yet amid the noise, something extraordinary had taken root. A human had arrived not to conquer, not to dominate, but to listen, to act fairly, and to build bridges. And in doing so, Evan had changed the way countless species would perceive humanity forever. Eventually, a small council of alien elders approached them. They had no authority over Evan's role, but they came as a gesture of respect. One elder, small and green with wide, expressive eyes, spoke first. "Human Evan Hale," it said, "your actions remind us that strength is not only measured in power or weapons. Strength can be in patience, fairness, and courage. You have shown this in abundance." Evan bowed slightly. "Thank you, I only try to do what's right." The elder's gaze softened. "That is enough to change the galaxy." Solith glanced at Evan. "Do you understand what you've accomplished?" Evan shook his head with a faint laugh. "I'm not sure, I stayed human." That's all. The three of them stood together as stars wheeled overhead. Evan knew that his life had changed forever. He could leave at any time. He had permission, freedom, and the skills to continue wandering the galaxy. Yet he did not want to leave. He had found a place where his kind, humans, were not just tolerated but valued. A place where empathy and understanding were more powerful than fear and strength. A place where he belonged. Lurie and Solith did not ask him to stay. They did not hold him. They simply walked beside him, sharing the same goal, making the station better, safer, and more connected. And Evan walked with them, not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as a human who chose to stay and make a difference. The stars beyond the station stretched endlessly, full of worlds yet unseen. Yet Evan knew that he had already traveled farther than many ever could, not in light years, but in understanding, in trust, and in the quiet power of humanity. The galaxy had assumed humans were weak, reckless, or volatile. Evan Hale proved them wrong. Not with weapons, not with cunning, but with the simplest tools a human possessed: empathy, patience, and the courage to do what was right, even when no one was watching. For the first time in years, Evan felt truly at home. And as he looked at the stars with Lurie and Solith by his side, he knew this was only the beginning of what humans could achieve when they stayed, when they listened, and when they chose to act with understanding in a galaxy that so often overlooked it. Humans had not conquered, they had built, and that was far more powerful than anyone had predicted. The station hummed around them. Ships continued to dock. Aliens went about their business, and in the quiet moments between, the galaxy watched. Watching a human who did not need to be the strongest, the fastest, or the most dangerous. Watching a human who simply chose to be human, and in doing so, changed everything. And in that choice, the galaxy understood something it had never understood before. Humans were not just another species. Humans were the bridge. Humans were the surprise. Humans were the ones who stayed, who listened, and who made the impossible seem natural. Evan took a deep breath, feeling the life of the station flow around him. He was free to leave. He could return to the stars any time, but he would stay, because some places and some bonds were worth staying for, and some humans were capable of more than anyone had ever imagined.